Thank you for joining our roundtable discussion this afternoon. We're really excited that you can join us for this Workday and Avaap sponsored conversation. Today, you're going to hear from Avaap's data and analytics experts, and we'll discuss the key considerations for developing a comprehensive data reporting and analytics strategy that's tailored to your institution's needs. So some of the things we're going to talk about are what are the key elements when developing a data strategy, including data governance, into data integrity, security, architecture, tying it to integrations. We had a conversation earlier today about integrations, determining what data needs to be converted and how much. Your experience or our experience creating reports in Workday, using Workday delivered reporting, Workday's Prism tool, as well as strategizing and how to manage and report off data outside of Workday. We'll even, time permitting, it's a lot of ground to cover, discuss some best practices for creating richer and dynamic and advanced analytics with additional data sources and solutions. So lots to talk about today. I'd like to do some quick introductions. My name is Amy LaHate. I lead Avaap's higher education sales practice. I've been helping institutions select, implement, and optimize ERP systems in the higher ed space for the past 25 years. Started my career in higher education student services, career services at MIT, Northeastern University, and American University. Obtained my master's in higher ed admin as well. And then I spent 14 years at Ellucian implementing SIS systems before I moved over to the Workday ecosystem in 2017, and I have not looked back since. I'm excited to turn things over to my partner in crime, Analia Morrow. She's going to be today's facilitator. So Analia, over to you.
Thank you, Amy. My name is Analia Morrow, and I am responsible for our customer experience focused on higher education. My passion is higher education. I also focus on innovations and our strategies for successful projects within higher education. My background is all on the client side. I like to say I stopped counting at 29 years of higher ed experience. I've been a registrar, advisor, faculty member, AVP for enrollment management at the first school to go live with Workday recruiting and admissions about 10 years ago. Have my PhD in higher ed administration. It's really exciting for us to be with you to talk with some of our experts from data conversion. We had a meeting earlier, a roundtable earlier today on integration, and some of you may have been on that integrations discussion, and already there were questions about data conversion. We know it's a hot topic, and we're excited about the team that we've brought together to talk with you. Before we get into the weeds with our panelists, I want to let Amy do some overview things first.
Sure. Thanks, Analia. So before we get started, just wanted to cover a couple housekeeping items. This session will be recorded and distributed to any institution that has registered. You should receive that by tomorrow or early next week. As we said, we're going to lead the conversation. It's Avaap-led conversation, but we do want it to be pretty, interactive. Since we have a larger group, we typically like to use the chat for questions. So you can feel free to post questions in the chat throughout, and we will be monitoring those and responding to those. We had a couple of Ellucian Banner and Colleague customers reach out to us to discuss today's topic, but I did want to note that the majority of the content that we are talking about applies to other legacy ERP systems, not just Ellucian Banner and Colleague. And then finally, wanted to thank our colleagues at Workday for co-sponsoring today's discussion. We appreciate their partnership with us, and they helped to bring all of us together today. So I did want to just share some highlights on Avaap if you're not familiar with who we are. Avaap is a Workday certified implementation partner since 2016. We have over 400 consultants who provide end-to-end technology transformation services. So from ERP project readiness through implementation, through post-production support, change management, and of course, data and analytics services that we're going to talk about today. We've been partnering with higher education institutions for over 20 years on their transformation initiatives. And I have a snapshot here that you can see who we've worked with through the years with some of our Workday implementations in the middle. If you'd like to learn more about Avaap, We have included some additional information on our consultancy practice at the back of this deck, and you'll get a copy of the deck and a copy of the recording as well. Lastly, wanted to point out that today's session is actually part of a larger roundtable series Avaap has been co-sponsoring with Workday from throughout the fall, and it will run through early next year. We're looking to expand it into the spring. It's called Pivot to Workday. And our goal is to provide monthly roundtable discussions that focus on helping your institution evaluate, prepare, and become educated on what you need to do to successfully implement Workday. And we're also offering up special packages and pricing as part of the series. So if you're interested in learning more, my contact information will be at the end of today's session. And besides that, I think I'm ready to turn things over to our experts. So we'll start with Jason to do some introductions.
Yes, thank you. So my name is Jason Wood. I'm a practice vice president for our data and analytics practice here at Avaap. I primarily oversee our data and analytics project, solution delivery for our customers, where we provide data services from modern data strategy, architecture, road mapping, to building out data platforms, center of excellence, or even custom advanced data and analytics solutions, and even post implementation managed services. And so it's the full spectrum of the life cycle, both functional and technical. But yeah, happy to be here today and looking forward to the discussion.
Great. Thank you. We'll go to Scott.
Hi, everyone. Scott Souther. I am a senior manager in our platform data conversion practice here at Avaap, focusing on the what we call the platform side, HCM, payroll, financials. I've been in the Workday ecosystem since 2008, so 15 plus years, focused primarily on data conversion, working with the Workday tools from the very beginning when we only had one tool available at our disposal. Now there's multiple on different categories and different uses. I also focused on building a lot of tools for customers to make it as easy as possible to implement Workday, and to because it is a kind of a one-time exercise, but it is a heavy lift and an important piece of the deployment. So happy to be here and talk to you about my experience in this space. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Go to Nick. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nick Mahan. I am the overall Workday platform side reporting and analytics lead here at Avaap. I have a little bit less experience than Scott, about 9 years of experience, all in the reporting and the analytics side. I'm really excited to be able to speak with everyone. Workday is a really fantastic system to be able to source all of your data. As we go through this entire presentation, I'm truly excited to be able to share all the opportunities that we have with you.
Thank you, Nick. All right, Jason, I want to pick on you first, and let's start at the big level and just talk about what you see as the elements of a data strategy and what's often in there, because it's a buzz phrase. We hear it all the time. What do you think are the important pieces to go in there?
Yeah, I think at the biggest level, I think the first thing is thinking about what does the institution's overall strategic roadmap look like, if there is one. So really taking a step back, assessing and understanding what's the vision, what are the key initiatives, goals, investment areas that really rely on digital and data transformation. So some common examples of that today could be things like maybe centralizing data and analytics to mitigate data silos, making data more accessible, trustworthy across the institution, or maybe it's things like data transparency and making information more available externally for students or parents or prospective students. Or maybe it's things like getting a 360 view of the student and getting a better understanding of the students in real time, improving the overall student experience, retention, graduation rates, things like that. Or maybe it's using data and predictive analytics to more effectively target and attract the right students, the right donors, or better predict demand to plan accordingly, things like that. Or the big buzz now, maybe it's AI and automation to improve processes, to better understand students, prospective students, things like that. In order to achieve those types of kind of common strategic objectives and really stay competitive in the modern higher ed landscape, how data is managed across the institution becomes critical. So Annalie, if you want to go, we have a visual on the next slide that we can kind of walk through here. Yes, there we go. So you can see in the visual here what it's representing. It's really representing conceptually a modern approach to managing data and analytics across the institution to provide capabilities that can achieve those strategic or maybe more advanced types use cases and data initiatives. And as many of you probably know, and as you can see in the left box here, with disparate data sources, there's rich data all across the university, well beyond the critical data that resides in Workday. So depending on what data you've decided to use Workday for, what data is going into Workday, those data silos and disparate data, it could be, maybe it's CRM, recruiting data, or maybe it's learning management system data, or even housing, dining data, or key card swipes at the rec center, financial aid data, student activities engagement, whatever it is. There's just rich data everywhere that can be leveraged. But without modern data approaches to make that data more accessible and usable to kind of support those strategic objectives, those data reporting silos and process inefficiencies and inconsistencies will continue to limit what you can achieve there. So as we move towards the center of the visual here, having a modern centralized data platform to integrate this disparate data, providing more flexibility, scalability to efficiently support those strategic data initiatives that come your way, while of course still maintaining strong security and governance is crucial. So these types of centralized data platforms are often called data warehouses, data lakes. You've probably heard that before. They can enable that more effective and efficient research, exploration, and innovation with really faster data access and insights when responding to those urgent or maybe ad hoc data requests. It also enables you to kind of create more centralized, trusted data sets that allow for those more consistent KPIs and reporting across the enterprise. And of course, can provide more advanced analytics capabilities like the Student 360 view, predictive analytics like predicting things like student attrition, or Gen AI solutions or natural language capabilities. So all those advanced solutions. And as we move to the right of this visual, you can see there's reporting and analytics capabilities where you can see, of course, Workday is going to be a key player, but it may not be the end all be all, really just depending on the needs of the institution. Workday is going to provide, obviously, all the necessary capabilities to support really the majority of your business-centric, ERP-centric, operational reporting and dashboards for data in the Workday ecosystem. And of course, with Prism, it's also going to be able to provide you with the ability to bring in and blend external data with Workday data and the Workday tenant and within the Workday ecosystem to really allow you to extend and enhance the Workday reporting and dashboard experience with that additional data. But
So I'm hearing
yeah.
it starts bigger, like everything you want to do with data, all the information you have, governing it. You talked about silos. We all
Yep.
know those certainly exist. And then whittling it down to the best way to get access to see the data, how to use it, who's going to use it, those kinds of things as part of your strategy.
Right, exactly. That should be a big part of it because, I mean, as some of you may experience, when you have these types of maybe more strategic use cases that need to get access to these disparate data systems, it can be a pain. It can be a major roadblock to try to get to that information. Some people are unaware that data is even available, where it exists, who to go to access it. There's different processes to access that data. Sometimes it takes days, sometimes it takes weeks. So it can just be a challenge. So it makes it much more efficient to get it all centralized in kind of that central area in a more efficient, governed fashion to be more proactive and be more get faster insights, more advanced analytics, all of those things to support those strategic initiatives.
It's so exciting when that data starts to come to life and you can see things start to make sense and uncover data that you didn't know was there to give you answers to questions you didn't know you had. So it's exciting to this. I know that one of the questions that we often hear is, what are we going to convert? How are we going to do it? And how much should we convert? So I'm going to come back to you in a minute, Jason, but I want to start with you, Scott. On the Workday side, what can folks expect when they're converting Banner or Colleague or other legacy system into Workday?
Yeah, good question. So, from the platform side, the focus is really going to be on standing up Workday for operational readiness day one, right? So while, history is always a topic of conversation, we're going to be configuring and loading the data so that operations can happen as soon as we flip the switch into production, right? So all of our workers are migrated over, and they have compensation and benefits and tax elections, and we can process payroll accordingly. We can pay invoices. We can do everything we need to do day one. And Workday does provide areas of where we can house history in different ways. And Jason has talked about how we can use history and different data in third-party systems or through Workday's Prism reporting capabilities. But the primary focus is going to be on getting it stood up so that day one operations can happen. And that's also because of the true transformative process of Workday, right? Workday is going to come to the table with business processes and security that are best in class and how the system is going to operate. But data and the configuration necessary, right? Our job profiles and job catalogs, our organization structures, what Workday calls the FDM, earnings codes, deductions, all that is very customer centric and needs to be configured from the very beginning. And it's viewed in a way of this is how we operate today and how we want to operate going forward. How can we condense or consolidate or refine and make better? It's truly transformative in nature. It's not a lift and shift process. So moving history in a lot of ways is unnecessary and kind of muddies up a new system with junk data, garbage in, garbage out, right? So the focus is going to be on how do we set up the system to operate in best class system from day one with that future state in mind.
I know that history question is always a big one, the how much do we bring in? I'll come back to you and let's talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But first, let's talk about how institutions can prep for their data for review, for transformation, prior to planning to go to Workday. What can they be doing now?
Yeah, so like we mentioned before, we kind of set up our process as simple as possible, simple flat file transformations and data. So I think prepping as far as identifying those subject matter experts or data stewards of who owns the data and who's going to make the decisions on how that data is going to be structured going forward, how they want their new system to operate is critical and important day one. Also identifying, technical resources that can easily access and make the process of pulling that data repeatable and transformative in nature, and being able to apply the necessary transformations, like I keep saying, from historic or legacy data to Workday data, identifying those resources and having them available lined up at the time when we're going to do the conversions during deployment is critical, right? You want to identify a big portion of that is identifying the owner who's going to have the most say into how this data structure is going to exist going forward, so that they can be able to connect the dots from legacy to Workday and apply those transformation logics necessary.
I feel like anytime somebody says repeatable process, there should be like sparkles and light up lights that come around, because that's such a key part. And Jason, I want to talk with you about what are some of those repeatable processes and what does the transformation of data look like as they're leading up to a Workday transformation, during it. What are some of the things that they can expect, and of course ways that we can help if that's not something that they have the staff to handle.
Yeah. So I think when it comes to repeatable processes, there's the governance side of it, right? Because there's data all over the place and everybody's working, it goes back to those silos, right? And everybody's doing it in a different way. And it's very confusing and very hard to get things done when everybody does something in a different way. So that's where the strategy comes into play. It's the process side of it, is identifying the opportunities to identify the optimal processes, getting things more centralized. When it comes to enterprise data analytics, there are some things that need to be separate and different when it comes to operational things. But when it comes to enterprise data and analytics, having consistency there can really enable a lot more efficient and really unleash the power of the data to solve those more strategic problems. So that's where repeatability comes into play. It makes it a lot more efficient. You can get much faster insights and get solutions built and get return on those much faster. So from the governance side of it, that's a big thing. And then automation, I would say automation as well. I mean, there's things that if there's repeatable process when it comes from data moving to one place to another, manual processes are a huge burden sometimes, right? There's a lot of extracting data, manually massaging data, things like that. So automating those repeatable processes, there's huge opportunity there as well to improve efficiencies and save cost.
And repeatable processes, you don't mean like Excel that people are manually updating. You're going to talk about some of the strategies that we have used ourselves or had clients use in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Excel's a great tool, right? And it's not like Excel's ever going to go away. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to any type of process where maybe you're extracting data out of a system and then you're doing something with that data and then you're sharing that data and then doing something with that data, it's typically a repeatable process that can be automated. So that's definitely even when it comes to conversion as well. I mean, if you have tools that can do conversion where you're extracting the data, transforming the data and loading it into the Workday tenant. Once you do it once, if you can have a repeatable process to do that over again with tools and process, that's going to make it way more efficient for the conversion side of it as well.
I get so excited to see our tools do that and just spit out the right answers. It's very cool. So Scott, before we talk about the how much, I think spoiler alert, it's going to be like when you ask a financial aid person how something is done, the answer is always it depends. We'll start with platform and how much data should an institution expect to bring over after you say it depends. You want to talk about what we typically see?
Yeah, right. So again, on the HCM side, typically it's your current active employee population, terms in the current year, so we can process W-2s at the end of the year, have that kind of information. And on the supplier master side, it's not every supplier or vendor that we've ever had. It's only ones paid in the last 2 or 3 years, maybe, because a lot of it is going to be a data cleanup exercise, right? That we can bring over some more information as needed. It's just going to be that we're going to have to go multiple iterations and refining of these extract and transformation processes to account for old or stale data to match Workday's format. Workday is going to pretty much restrict or try as best as it can to restrict bad data from entering the system, which means we have to do a lot of cleanup during the implementation, right? And a lot of transformation. The farther we look back, the more transformation we're going to need and the more value we lose in the data. If we're defaulting a lot of values to say, well, we no longer have these departments, these cost centers, these job codes, and we're defaulting values to something that says default, we lose the value of what that data means. And that's where we would want to leverage tools like Prism that can hold these legacy values and merge it with Workday values so we can see real data. From the conversion perspective, we want to limit that so we're not cleaning up old historic data that's going to not have a ton of value for us, and that we can, again, operate day one doing exactly what we need to do within the production environment.
So just so we allay fears, because you said earlier, you don't want to put a lot of bad or old data in there. And in limiting historical data certainly helps with that. So do you have a strategy where we start with like a year and then poke holes in what needs to be outside of that? Prism certainly lets auditing and reporting, state and federal reporting, all happen with the data without having to pull it into Workday, right? Would you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we typically do about a year, and it's not all equal, right? So your HCM employee population is, your active employees and those terminated in the current year, and it's pretty much their current job information. On the benefit side, we will convert current benefit elections with some history necessary for ACA reporting on the medical side only, and we're going to go through that as we start the project in the workshops that we kind of organize and execute in the very beginning when we're starting talking about this process. Again, on the supplier side, it's the last 2 or 3 years paid suppliers. Again, going farther back, we're just going to be spending a lot more time cleaning up address and junk information. On the payroll side too, we're bringing in like current year payroll results just so that we can process W-2 at the end of the year, right? It's depending on the go live date. So it's usually within that 1 year. Workday does offer multiple, and this is like you said, it depends, right? It depends on the use case. If we need to see all the terms within the last 7 years, for example, Workday has a lot of solutions in place for this very situation. So something called former workers, where we can load a lot more lightweight data that can be queried and can be accessed and used for rehiring of workers, for example. They have a history from a previous system area that is heavily leveraged for able to access and just kind of use for informational purposes about historic data without having to match to Workday's, object model. So there's a lot of opportunity there to leverage the different components that Workday already delivers. But from a true conversion purpose, it's generally 1 year, maybe 2 or 3, looking back, depending on what the specific requirement is. And like I said, it's not all equal. Some things are going to be easier to accommodate, and some things will be more of a challenge or maybe not possible, depending on the data model.
Great. And before we go to, I want to talk about student, Khalil asked the question, and great that you asked us the question that I wanted you to ask when you came to the integration one, so it gives us an opportunity to answer it for you. I'm going to go with Jason and talk about how institutions can best assess the data and what's ready for conversion, and then when it's ready. Like, we'll talk about that assessing transformation validation at a high level.
Yeah, I can definitely start, and Scott, feel free to chime in. But I mean, obviously there's requirements that are going to get provided from the Avaap or the Workday side of it to actually what needs to be converted for each of the specific areas that need to get loaded into Workday. But obviously it's important to understand if there's opportunities, if you know of areas of data quality that could be cleaned up, and doing some analysis on the quality of the data. If there's opportunities to clean that data up in the source system prior to getting that data out, this is the perfect opportunity as you're moving from your old system to the new system to make sure that you're cleaning up some of those issues, whether it's duplicate data or just multiple versions of a single value, things like that. That it does make sense to do that type of analysis up front because it's a perfect opportunity to do that kind of data quality assessment and take advantage of this migration to kind of, in the new world, have better data to support that. So I think that's one thing. And then obviously the requirements will be provided to you. You have to go in, locate that data, work with kind of the subject matter experts, identify where that data lives, connect to that data, extract that data so that it can be provided. So, and then map it to the Workday field. So requiring that subject matter expertise that can map that source data to the target data. But from the quality of data, it's always recommended, and it's a great time to make sure you're kind of doing that analysis up front to identify opportunities as you're going through this migration.
And that's an analysis that we can help with. We can help review your data, determine, give it a score of what we see, where we think the opportunities are. We certainly have a starting point with areas, everybody knows to look at addresses, but other areas where we see gotchas or areas where some opportunities for transformation always exist, we can share that with you. And then depending on the level of skill of your team, how many resources you have, how much time they have, we can help with any or all of those assessment and transformation duties.
Exactly. And as you said, Annalena, earlier, repeatability, we have repeatable processes where we can plug in and kind of help out with that stuff. So definitely.
Yes. All right. I want to give a little love to student, and I don't want to ignore that on the how much. Want to be sure that we understand, first and foremost, a transcript has to be generated through the life of the institution. So if you have been open 5 years or 100 years, every transcript will be available to be run in Workday. Now, what the data conversion looks like and which students are active and can register, that's more of a discussion. Certainly depends on the types of programs, how many you have active. There are about 66 direct data conversions that we do in a student project as in scope, and working with our team, we work with you to determine how far back things need to go, how far back we're going to build programs of study, courses. So there are different ways of loading the data that inform what's on the transcript, what students can register for, grade changes, those kinds of things. And then after we extract from whatever data source it is and bring it in. Then we ultimately load that into Workday and work with you to validate, make sure that everything is where you expect it to be. That is the key. That's the most important part. We want those transcripts to be correct and reflect the progress of the students, their ability to register, any holds, of course, the student financial data that's coming across. So it's not just about the transcript, but of course, that's the guiding principle. So we often see that there's an evaluation of how often, what your policies are on how long a student can be out before they have to reapply. And that may help drive some of the conversation on how much data, active data, goes in. The other factors that I talked about will also play a part. But again, like we said with Scott, it depends, but I just wanted to allay fears that all of the historical data for transcript will be there to make sure that you can generate those no matter how far back that goes. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about reporting. So Nick, I am going to go to you, and in general, let's be fun and say scale of 1 to 10, how easy is it to create a report in Workday? A simple report. Let's start there.
Simple report, I would put it at about a 7 or an 8. You know, you need to know exactly what you are looking for. So you need to have some level of knowing what the requirements of the report are, but the actual mechanics of creating a report is so much easier in Workday as opposed to a legacy relational database-based system, like either Banner or Colleague. You know, it's not, you have an entire UI, so you can have someone who is not as trained. You don't need a BI developer. You don't need a database admin. You can have someone at the business analyst level get in there and they can start generating reports. The lift from bringing a business analyst to writing reports is, I don't want to say negligible, but it is minor comparing to fully training your developers on whatever SQL stack that you have and all the rules. The benefit also of Workday reporting is, since everything is in the UI, at least for the generation of the reports, you're not just looking at a raw SQL script. It's a lot easier to debug whatever issues that you have because what's the equivalent of your select statement is in one section, all as a UI, all of your filters are in another section, effectively as a UI. Because Workday is an object-oriented based system, there are no joins that you need to do. Everything is already joined up. The mesh for Workday's data structure already exists. So it's really just getting the reps in on knowing what exactly to look for. It's much easier for a novice to get in there and write a report than a banner based.
And this is real-time reporting. So as something is happening behind the scenes, it's reflected. Everybody should be getting the same answer, real time, seeing things as it happens, which is very exciting. I'm hoping that some folks are excited about that capability.
Absolutely. There's also a major benefit of Workday over one of the legacy systems is, I think Workday has said before, everything is instance-based rather than just text fields. So what that means is, say that you're pulling an employee roster report, your workers, the worker names, it's a hyperlink. So if you want to click or it's like drill into, your workers on your report, you just click the hyperlink and you can immediately go to your workers profile, or you click the hyperlink and immediately go to their benefits elections. It's a much faster system to generate. You don't need to pop out back to the overall search bar to, drill into a worker. Workday has leading contextual actions better than any other system that I've seen.
That's great. Todd, I'm going to pause for a second and answer the couple questions in chat. Todd, you have a question about merging duplicates on the student side. There are various levers that you can pull to determine how much you want to automate merges and how much you want to have someone review. So if you're comfortable at the social security and name and date of birth level, there are other things in there that you can look at. There's a very extensive report that helps you manage duplicates and merge data and also unmerge. Hallelujah. If somebody does that, you can say, oh, I made a mistake, and quickly unmerge that. So it's a great feature. My professional career was spent a lot in South Florida, and many families in South Florida have twins with the same name, first and last parents, everybody, and just like one letter different in the middle name. So had to be creative in making sure we put Workday through its paces on testing match and merge and what would work well, and we had really good results. So I think that you'll be pleased there. And Manuel, I'll come back to you on the business glossary. Amy, remind me if I don't come back to that. And I want to go back to you, Nick, and let's talk a little bit about the data that we don't bring into Workday. So both Jason and Scott talked about, the ability to put historical data somewhere else and bring it in. And so we know that that's still going to be important, either for state, federal reporting, audits, grants, so many reasons that we may not want to clutter Workday with active data that we don't truly need to take action on, but we still need to report on it. So what does that process look like for Workday?
Yeah, absolutely. So Workday has a product that Scott and Jason both have alluded to before, which is called Prism, which is essentially a mini data warehouse, or I think more accurately is a data analytics tool that sits behind the Workday SSO. So essentially, when you're looking at Workday proper, it's an effective dated system, so you would need to stack transactions. Prism is not an effective dated. It's essentially a relational database that lives in Workday, so you can bring in flat legacy history files. So, if you want to have all of your transaction logs, so, all hires, terms, transfers, organizational changes, you can bring in that. You can bring all of your pay history in. You can bring all of your time block information in. You can bring all of your purchasing history in. Anything that you need, you can bring it directly into Prism. And then that living behind Prism, what you're able to do then is you are able to bring in ongoing Workday reports and union your historical data with your ongoing data and publish that within Workday. And then you can write the same reports off of your Prism data source as you do off of regular Workday data. So for the end user, there is no difference between your new Workday data and your legacy data. If you do enough of the transformations, and if you instance match and you go through the entire development process on your Prism data, it will be functionally interchangeable, and you're not going to have to go through the entire process of stashing your transactions and ballooning your data conversion budget, when really all you need that data for is to report on it.
Yes, that's key. Jason, I want to give you the opportunity to react to, in addition to Prism, I know that there are lots of tools. We talked about data warehousing and other things that may be needed, imaging systems that are needed within the institution to house all of this data. So would you talk a little bit about reporting on those, and then also best practice for advanced analytics with different data sources?
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, it really depends on the unique needs of the institution and what you're doing with data and what you're trying to do with data. But obviously Prism, as Nick kind of alluded to and we've talked about earlier, is a great extension to the Workday reporting and analytics ecosystem to do reporting out of Workday and really extend and enrich those reports. But sometimes there may be needs beyond that, or maybe your institution's at doing more advanced stuff, like Analia said, image processing or processing PDF files, or doing analysis on unstructured data, things like that. There may be other platforms or opportunities to more efficiently do that type of analysis, or maybe it's more advanced analytics, or just some of those more complex data use cases that may not just be the most optimal fit within the Workday Prism ecosystem. There's tons of tools out there today to be able to effectively deliver on those use cases, whether it's the data warehouse, data lake platforms, or analytics tools that go onto it. But it really does depend on the client needs and what you're trying to do with the data. So you can see there's a Venn diagram here. You can see the Workday world, what it does extremely well. And then there's some overlap, of course, and it really depends again on the client and the use case and what you're trying to do with the data. Also, who are the stakeholders, right? Are all of these stakeholders, does it make sense for them to go into Workday to get all their information, or are they already doing reporting in some other location and it makes sense to feed that data to another location so that they continue to do the reporting out of that system? So it's a lot of conversations to be had, and that's where the strategy comes into play, right? That we talked about earlier. It's coming up with what is the best approach that's going to put you in the best position today and for the future to support, obviously, the operational needs, but also what are the strategic analytics initiatives that you need to do that are a little bit more advanced, unstructured data, advanced analytics, predictive analytics, AI, all that type of stuff. So a lot to consider there. And again, it goes back to the data strategy and why it's so important to have those assessments and analysis and kind of decisions to make sure you're mitigating risks and getting the most return on your investment.
And these are things that we can help the institution do, both with that high level analysis of all of their data, what they want to do with it, the best tools, the best way to show the data, how we work with Prism or other systems to make sure that everything is transparent and available for what needs to be done. Yep. Why don't we go to, I know that we've already shown this slide, but based on what we've talked about, Jason, would you recap a little bit how some of the things that we've talked about, how much data, where the data is, how it's governed, what the security is, all of those things, how do they come together? Amy said that the last slide was a good overview, but this one is too. And I see some questions coming in. So while you do an overview, I want the audience folks, please feel free to start typing questions and we'll be transitioning to those after we do an overview with Jason.
Yeah, I think when it comes to historical data and all of the data and the governance of it, again, I think that's where putting data governance within your strategy is important. So when you're assessing how is all this data managed, how does it need to be managed, what are the compliance requirements around all of this disparate data across the institution, how does it need to be used, how does it need to be accessed, analyzing all that information. And then data governance is a big part of the data strategy. Obviously, the technology is great. It's going to enable you to do all these things. But how does it need to be governed, secured, so that is following all the compliance standards and all the things like that you need to do while still enabling self-service and efficiency, right? It's not an easy thing to do, but it is doable and achievable if you have the right strategy in place. So understanding it involves talking to other areas, right? And understanding what are their compliance needs and understanding how their data is governed and how it needs to be governed. So when you're bringing it into the centralized analytics processes, everyone's aligned on those processes. And it's an efficient, consistent process that can be repeated while also, again, maintaining that strong governance and security. And all of these technologies that you see, all these logos that you see on the screen, have the ability to secure data in a very flexible way. So being able to support all of those different requirements, again, it's not the technology is not the hard part. It's the people and the process side of it. But it's important to get that stuff figured out because it really will unleash what you're trying to accomplish with those modern strategic kind of advanced use cases. So it's super important to have those conversations.
Thank you. I want to give you your hardest question of the day.
All right.
And I'm going to ask you the same one after. So I'm going to be nice to you and give you the opportunity, but I know Jason will be fine. So Jason, if you had to boil it down, everybody wants one tip to walk away with. What's the most important thing you would give as a tip for data preparation, cleanliness, transformation, planning? One.
Yeah. Well, I might get to the first thing is having a strategy in place, right? I mean, that's the obvious one. I've talked about that a lot. But again, I think it really is kind of getting data accessible and making it more accessible. That's usually one of the biggest hurdles in holding people back from being able to achieve some of those more strategic things that are on a lot of institutions' roadmaps, right? To ultimately reduce costs, improve efficiencies, increase revenue, all of those things. But to do that, you need access to all of the data because there's so much rich data out there. And without having some type of process to make it more accessible, it's just going to hold you back. And it's going to take, as it takes days, weeks, months to be able to get the information you need, and it really holds you back. So, I mean, if that's one thing beyond the data strategy side of it, which is really, again, the data strategy is going to set you up for success near term and long term, mitigate risk, increase ROI through the process, and make sure you're going down the path that makes sense for your organization and at the pace of your organization. But when it comes to strategy, especially in higher ed and in the public sector space in general, there's so much data everywhere. And it's different owners, different ways of accessing it. A lot of times that's the first thing that comes up as part of the assessment and strategy. And one of the biggest pain points that we hear when you start having those discussions.
And all of that is in addition to the amazing amount of data that's going to be transparent just inherently within going to Workday. Things that have been hidden in silos or behind walls that were very difficult to get to, that required deep coding to pull, is right there at your fingertips in Workday. So that experience alone is transformative, but understanding this whole strategy is so important and adds that value. All right.
Yeah, and one more thing on that, I just want to add, it's a third thing. I'm sorry, but the other thing is I mean, all of you have probably, if you've kind of had people come to you and talk about all these data and analytics tools, there's thousands of them out there, and they do so many different things, and some of them say they do everything. So it's important, again, that's where the strategy can play, is to understand what are the needs of your institution, and don't just get sold on one product because this is what they tell you. You need to understand what are the needs of your institution, and make sure you're kind of getting the technology and building the infrastructure that, again, that makes sense for your institution.
Right. Thank you. All right, Scott, what's the one tip you would have folks walk away with?
Keep it simple, right? I mean, look at what you need and what you don't need. And you know, I've done a lot of historical conversions in the past, and you know, there's always some buyer's remorse, right? So you got to look at, you know, really what you need to operate, and find the, doesn't necessarily mean you can't have what you need, just find the simplest solution to execute against it, right? Doesn't have to be one size fits all. So that would be my tip.
Keep it simple. I love it. I love it. All right. I see that Shaylin has a couple questions. I hope that I'm saying that correctly. Todd, I want to go back to, no, it was Manuel. I want to go back to your question about the business glossary. So depending on what you mean by that, you will get an administrator guide. There's tons of information there on what functions are, how they work within Workday. There's also an extensive area of the Workday website called Community that is behind a login that you'll have access to, that also has extensive information, mini videos, short trainings, lots of things at your fingertips. One of the questions we often get is, how do we document the business processes? And so people in their mind are thinking about those big Visio maps that are up on the wall and all the sticky notes. We do that sometimes just to walk through a process. But the wonderful thing is that Workday self-documents all of the business processes. And so just like the reports come in instantaneously and you can see those changes in your reports, business processes, as you make those changes, let's say that items that are $500 and over go to the manager. If they're $1,000, they go elsewhere. That shows up immediately, and the next person that does that process will get that if today is your effective date. And we don't have time to get into effective dating, but that is a key part of how configurations and when configurations take place, and the kind of data that you want to bring in. So I'm hoping that I went in the right direction. If not, please let me know, and I'm happy to dig in that a little bit more. All right, Shaylin, let's talk about the historical data that's not being brought into Workday and Prism. So Nick, I'll go to you. You want to look at the questions there and provide some insight?
Of course, Shaylin. So yeah, let me, I'll answer the first question, specifically, how are we mapping everything in Prism, and then I will move on to the second. So generally, when the development of, Prism and reporting, I would say it's about half a step behind the data conversion development life cycle. So generally what happens is, as you're developing your data conversion scripts, and all of the extracts out of your legacy system, you're going to be making data decisions. You're going to be developing crosswalk tables. You're going to be doing transformations just by the nature of this work. The benefit of Prism is that we would be able to take the exact same crosswalk documentation that you are using on your SQL extract scripts. We can put that as our own crosswalk tables into Prism so you can get that historical view when we're unioning up. The second part of that is, when we're bringing on the ongoing Workday data onto your historical data set, I think there's just going to be a little bit of known knowns that some fields may not be coming, or there will be net new fields. I think that's just a matter of change management, just explaining to the stakeholders and the business owners that there is going to be a difference just by the nature of fundamentally changing your HRIS and your ERP system. Regarding the second question is, do you use Prism as a data warehouse? Generally, you do not. Prism really is a bring in what you need operationally. How are you going to satisfy your operational report requirements, as opposed to where's all of my data going to live? I think that Jason has brought this up earlier. It's like, it's part of your overall data strategy. If Workday and if your ERP and HRS are going to be the sun in your solar system, bring it into Prism and report on all of it there. But if you think about it, like, would a truck fleet manager really need to see maintenance records in Workday? Probably not. That would live in a different data warehouse. So I think that's the decision of where organizationally do you want your central hub for your data to live. Prism really is an extension and a supporting feature to aggregate outside data within the Workday context, as opposed to truly being the data lake, the unstructured data lake.
So it sounds like, based on what Jason said earlier, there's an opportunity to evaluate all of the data needs and determine if Prism will meet the needs for data warehousing, data lake, if there's something else based on other needs, imaging, what have you, to add into that. And it's all part of the larger strategy with what data you have, who needs to access it, and how you need to use it. Correct?
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. It's all part of the strategy. Yep.
Okay, good. I think that Raj maybe had a hand up earlier. Don't know if you still have a question. If you do, feel free to come off mute, or you can type in. And anyone else, if you have questions, we'll wait a couple more minutes for questions. Make sure that we cover everything that we know about. As we're letting some last questions coming back in, Amy, why don't you talk about some upcoming events that we have?
Sounds good. So I know I mentioned earlier that today's discussion is part of our larger series called Pivot to Workday. So we'd love for you to join our upcoming session in January. It's going to be focused on Workday financial aid. And we also plan on adding some student-focused topics February through April. So would love your feedback on what you'd like to hear. Even after today's discussion, it sounds like we might have some other great topics for follow-up roundtable. So definitely reach out. My contact information is at the bottom of this slide. You can use the QR code to register for any upcoming events. And then, we always like to offer up, if you'd like a more of a one-on-one conversation rather than a larger group setting, you can reach out to me or your Workday account executive, and we're happy to set up a follow-up call with you. With that, I guess I'm just going to pause to see if we have any other questions, because I know we have a few minutes left.
We
Comments
don't
from
have
the
the music, so if you're typing, we will wait a couple of minutes. It's been so exciting. I am so grateful that we have passionate people about data, and I'm passionate about the output of the data. I can't say I am as passionate about transforming the data, but I'm so glad that we have those with us who are and know how and can support you from beginning to end and thereafter. So it's been wonderful to chat with you and have you share your expertise and your knowledge with us. We really appreciate your time. It looks like we have no additional questions. So as Amy said, we will make the recording available to you. We appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being with us, and we hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you all. Take care.